We'll give it a few minutes while we're waiting. Please feel free to jump in the chat and let us know who you are and where you're joining from. Hello, hello. We'll give it another minute because I'm still seeing people join in. Please let us know where you're joining from in the chat. Oh, thank you guys for joining us. Indiana, California, Ohio, Florida. So glad you guys could be here with us. Just another minute and we'll get started. We are super excited to celebrate with you guys. I'm seeing a lot of sunny weather in the comments too, so that always sounds good. All right, well, if you just joined, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you're joining from. And we will go ahead and jump in here in just a few seconds. We have someone from across the pond in Spain. Thank you, everyone, for spending your time with us today. All right, well, I will jump in. If you do join in mid-time, please feel free to just go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know where you're coming from in the chat. But good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are, of course. I see we have a lot of different locations here already. Welcome to the Open Skills Network Showcase event titled The Skills Library is Open. We are thrilled that you guys could join us today. We're celebrating the first Open Skills Collection releases. It's a pretty exciting day. We will explore how the Open Skills collections were created, how you can apply them to your skills work, and we're also spotlighting partners that are in the progress on creating their own Open Skills collections. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Kelly Ryan Bailey. I'm the podcast host of Let's Talk About Skills Baby. I'm a senior advisor to MZ Burning Glass. I'm a member of OSN, of course, and I'm just a longtime skills warrior. I'm really honored to be here to host today. OSN is a a coalition of employers, education providers, military, government agencies, technology organizations, and other stakeholders dedicated to advancing skills-based education and hiring. Our goals are to create the foundation to advance a more equitable labor market, empower learner workers to understand and communicate the value of their skills, talent, and experiences, and to eliminate barriers to implementing skills-based education and hiring practices across industry sectors at scale. If you are new to our community, we highly suggest you head over to openskillsnetwork.org for all the latest information. And we would like to thank Walmart Foundation for their continued support of OSN. Huge thank you again. And we have a few announcements to share with you today. So the Open Skills Network, OSN for short, just to keep us on track today, the OSN Skills Collaborative projects are continuing and will present on their work in March, so please be sure to join us. OSN is also going to be at the ASU GSV Summit, so if you are attending, make sure that you plan to visit our booth. NWGU and Concentric Sky will be releasing the OSMIT enhancements soon, and those are going to include OSMIT to OSMIT search. As always, connect and share with OSN on social, LinkedIn. We're on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Please be sure to come out and find us. And before we jump in, there are just a couple of housekeeping items for today's showcase. We will move through our speakers and save room for you all to jump in with questions afterwards. Please make sure to enter your burning questions in our Q&A section. Of course, we don't want you to forget, we don't want you to forget them. So just make sure you enter them when they come to mind, and we'll be sure to get them answered for you at the end. We are also available via chat should you have any issues, or email info@openskillsnetwork.org if you're having any trouble at all. And lastly, you're seeing a QR code here up on your screen. You can head over to your photos and scan that code, which will take you directly to a very quick 5-question survey, because we really need your feedback. We'd love to get your feedback on our events and recommendations for topics to consider for our future showcase events. And we're also going to leave some time today at the end of the session. It's just going to take you a couple minutes to get that done. And we'll make sure that we stick the link as well into the chat, just in case you haven't used a QR code before. All right, so let me go ahead and let you know who we've got on deck for today. We are going to hear from Western Governors University, Education Design Lab, Southern New Hampshire University, and Learning Economy Foundation. Of course, like I said earlier, we will have time for the Q&A session at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to the WGU team. Racheal, I think you're muted.
How are we doing now?
Perfect.
Wonderful. Hi, everybody. My name is Racheal Killian. I am a lead skills architect in the Workforce Intelligence and Credential Integrity Department at Western Governors University. Later on, we'll hear from Melissa and Brent, and they'll get a chance to do some introductions as well. So if we could just, thank you. Western Governors University is so excited to announce the public release of 9 skills collections. These collections are organized around occupational relation and affinity groups. These collections are meant to be collaborative. We really hope you take the opportunity to provide feedback on these collections so that we can improve upon them and have them evolve over time based on your input. We do plan to release new public collections on a quarterly basis. So I'm going to head in the chat. I'll put the link to the page that you can visit to take a look at our collections. We have leveraged RSDs and used practitioners, hiring managers, third-party partners, as well as labor market demand data to create these collections. This first release comprises of 9 discrete collections, including business ethics, curriculum and instruction, diversity, equity, and inclusion essentials, information systems security, special education, social emotional learning, character education, medical assistance, and value-based care, which we will hear more about in just a few minutes. Please take note of the feedback button at the bottom underneath of those collections. That is where we would love to get your input. Please take a chance, click in there and let us know what you think. Provide us some feedback. We would really love to hear what you have to say. These collections are available to you through the public URI. We invite you to leverage the open data to begin or build on your journey and skills, so you can go ahead and leverage RSDs through your organization. The collections appear in this format with the unique URI. Note the ability to download up there in the top right corner. The entire collection can be downloaded for your use. Once you download it, you can re-upload the collection or collections to your own Osmond instance. And you can edit, revise, reuse, or add to these collections as you see fit. They're there for everyone's use. On this slide, what we're taking a look at is a unique RSD, a rich skills descriptor. Each RSD in the collection also has a unique URI, allowing for individual RSD downloads as well. Individual RSDs also download in the correct format for edits, revisions, reuse, or additions to or repurposing for your own Osmond instance. We are so very pleased to share these with you. We'd love to see how you're using them and get you started or keep you moving in your skills journey. With that, I think I'll hand it to Melissa to share more about our value-based care collection and how WGU is leveraging RSDs.
Thanks so much, Racheal, for explaining the collections that we have made available from our skills library and talking about how these rich skills descriptors can be used by the greater community at large. Like you said, we're really excited for this release. We've been talking as a community about rich skills descriptors and skill collections for a long time, and we hope that this is able to serve as an entry point for others to be able to begin to use rich skills descriptors from our published collections. And like Racheal said, we're really looking forward now that these are open to hear your feedback so that we can collaborate together to make them even better. So I'm Melissa Clark. I'm a lead skills architect at Western Governors University, and Brent Capriotti and I will walk through ways that Western Governors University is embedding rich skills descriptors into digital credentials as metadata. And so we're going to do that through the lens of our value-based care skills collection. Oops, and Christian, could you advance this? Thank you. So we are thinking at WGU about categorizing and cataloging skills into collections in our library in a number of ways. So Racheal was describing some of those. So for instance, we may create a skills collection based upon particular occupations or job titles, by relevant standards or certifications, by those relevant for a given product offering, and the decisions leading to how we create a collection are based on intended use and partners involved in reviewing and applying, putting into practice those rich skills descriptors in that collection. So we're talking about the value-based care skills collection today, and the RSDs in this were pulled from a broader skills library database or were developed to meet a specific need identified by our industry experts from WGU's Institute for Health Value. And the RSDs in this collection are not intended to exemplify every single skill necessary in delivering value-based care, but they're really focused for a specific purpose. And Brent is going to show you how we have embedded these RSDs from this collection into a digital certificate and badger, as well as how we have also represented them through leveraging the Credential Engine Registry. So I'll pass over to you, Brent.
Thank you, Melissa. Hi, everyone. I'm Brent Capriotti from WGU. I work with Racheal and Melissa. And this next part or portion of the presentation really is about, I guess in my mind's eye or in my heart, I think this is about, we talk about skills as currency, digital currency, and we use them for important things, obvious things like learning and assessment, content design and development, potentially inspiring job descriptions and things of that nature. But the two things I wanted to talk about today are related to how RSDs can be leveraged and empower digital credentials in terms of the hosted credentials and how they're issued, and then also in terms of systems of record around credentialing data and framework data around that. So that's really what this portion of the presentation is about. What you're looking at right here is a credentialing tool, an open badges based badging tool that hosts digital badges and allows for the issuance of digital badges and a host of other things. It's called Badger Pro, and it is the platform that WG uses for our hosting and issuance of digital credentials. In line with what Melissa was discussing, this is the an actual WGU micro credential from Badger Pro for value-based care. And what you see on the screen is the interface presenting the basic properties of the Open Badges data specification. So you see an image that is standard in Open Badges. You see the name next to it. That's also a data standard, a property. Below that, you see the description, and then below that we see earning criteria. These are all buckets that you could think of them the same way that you think about the RSD scheme and the things that have to get filled out. Some mandatory, some optional. So just long-winded way of saying that this is a badges screen, and Open Badges compliance platforms generally, they might have different angles on their interface and their coverage of it, but under the hood, Open Badges end up being the same types of data baked into the graphic on the left-hand side, the PNG file potentially, or as a data payload that explains, covers or includes all the metadata that underlies the badge. So on the next screen, you'll see a portion of the badge called skills. There we go. So in a badging tool in Badger Pro, you just scroll down to see this. And these are alignments. They're called alignments in the Open Badges data specification. It's very straightforward and streamlined how they're presented. So each of these ties to an RSD from OSMT. So very simple. Let's take a look at the first one, evidence-based research analysis. That is a skill name. Below it, you see the full skill statement for that RSD. And then you also see that it's a link. That link goes back to the system of record for that RSD, kind of like what Racheal and Melissa were just showing. So the system of record for that particular RSD and all the RSDs affiliated with this credential goes back to the OSMT. So if someone wants to learn more, or if a machine, something consuming this data, wants to make further meaning of it, that's available to be harvested. So that's how it presents to someone who's consuming it. The next screen shows how easy it is to actually set these up. Alignments in the Open Badges standard, I think they're originally inspired by looking to align academic standards and occupational standards more than anything, but they really can be used generically, flexibly. So they make perfect sense for skills because it allows skills to be covered and baked into an open badge in a structured data type of way that could be more completely leveraged by a consuming system. So listing skills in a narrative is one thing, but now that we have structured data around this skill, you can see how it maps back to the different aspects of the RSD schema. So you've got the name, that first purple arrow pointing to the RSD name from the OSMT on the right. Next, you have the URL that again points back to the system of record and the unique published instance for this skill up at the top. And then below that, you have the short description. In the alignment, we list the full skill statement there. That's just a choice by WGU to do so. And then below that, very important, I have it encircled in purple dots, is OSMT for the framework name. And its framework is not a required field, but it's great to define it because this is what tells consuming systems and also tells Badger Pro in this case, that this thing is a skill and it should be handled and viewed as a skill and presented as a skill. So Badger Pro does the wonderful work of actually taking those alignments tied to OSMT and MC for that matter, and actually bumping them up in the presentation so that they have a little bit more emphasis and are seen sooner compared to the other alignments that are not skill related. And then below that, we have the unique code for this specific RSD, which is derived from the URL as well. So that's how easy it is to represent an RSD in an alignment tied to a credential. And one of my favorite questions is, so what? And the so what on this, obviously from a human perspective, is you can actually, if I'm a consumer, if I'm a hiring manager, if I'm looking at somebody's assertion around their degree or their credentials that they've earned, I get a more complete story in terms of what they can do. And yes, it can be an exhaustive list of RSDs, but at least it is listed in the badge. And I can learn more about each of those by hitting the link if I happen to be curious about them. But the big technical so what around this is really about baking skills RSD data into badges in a structured way that can be consumed by systems like learning and employment records and in the future hiring systems to help with the matchmaking process of connecting talent with opportunity in a more efficient and less biased way, honestly. So that's the big win here, that I guess a major reason that representing RSDs in open badges in a structured data way has a lot of power and is going to enable a lot of things that are in development right now, like learning and employment record solutions and integration with hiring systems and things of that nature. So now, shifting gears, we just looked at the creation and the issuance of digital badges that have RSDs baked in. We're going to shift gears and look at Credential Engine. And I'm still, I view myself as a beginner in Credential Engine, but WGU has started doing some building. The tool on the left that you see is called Credential Engine Publisher. Value-based care is set up as a credential in this tool. Credential Engine to me is a way to create like a tapestry of information and data around credentials, learning opportunities, related competency frameworks, pathways. It's very powerful. And RSDs can find their home in that construct at the competency framework level, which is wonderful. That's what we're looking at on the left. So that's using Credential Engine Publisher as someone who actually wants to build content in Credential Engine. You have the ability to build all of those different aspects that I was just referring to. So we created the value-based care micro-credential and all the information around it. And then the 3 learning opportunities at WG, those are courses that are affiliated with it, and then constructed the value-based care competency framework in Credential Engine Publisher that is derived from the RSD collection for value-based care in OSMT that Melissa just showed. So quick look, if you see the blue part of that screen on the Credential Engine Publisher side, that is really a pop-out window. It shows that there's 37 competencies. Those are RSDs that are represented in this credential framework for value-based care. The competency label is the skill short name, articulate complex ideas, same example we used in the Badger Badge. Below that in bold is the full skill statement, articulate complex ideas, yada, yada, yada. You've got the occupational codes, the SOC codes that are resident or represented in the RSD as well below that. And then immediately below that, important, the link back to the source record for that RSD, the OSNT base link is listed as the identifier for this particular data point in the competency framework. So that, in a nutshell, is how easy it is to represent RSDs in a competency framework in Credential Engine, and then connect them with, relate them with credentials and learning opportunities and other things. And creating those connections enables, I guess, the rest of this ecosystem in some pretty important ways. On the next screen, you'll see what it's like to be a consumer using Credential Engine. So this is called Credential Finder. It's a great interface from Credential Engine that allows anyone who's interested in learning more about an organization, their credentials, their learning opportunities, their pathways, and their competency frameworks, a front end and searchable way to do so in an efficient way. So again, this is a consumer's view of what we were just looking at using Credential Finder for the value-based care micro-credential. And looking down below in the lower left, you could see that it requires 3 learning opportunities. Those are the 3 courses that I mentioned. And then I guess in context for this conversation, look at the big purple arrow that points to the connections for this micro-credential. And these connections can be made to micro-credentials and learning opportunities, by the way. But this particular micro-credential requires all 37 of those competencies that were listed on that screen that we showed just before. And those are the RSDs from the value-based care skills collection from the OSMT. So that's how simple it is to really represent RSDs as an important layer in Credential Engine, because the so what here obviously is that I as a consumer can get in and actually experience this, understand the story of what is offered from an organization and all the competencies or RSDs that potentially underlie it. But then machine learning and structured data is a big part of this as well. So if you can imagine consuming systems in the future being able to use a unique ID for this particular micro-credential, value-based care, and being able to ingest all the related data tied to it around those learning opportunities and around those competencies, which are the RSDs, and be able to make meaning from that. Solutions like learning and employment records can leverage that kind of information in structured data in ways that really empower it in the future and help us create this tapestry that goes from large degree offerings to small, the individual RSDs that support all these things, all in one solution. So Kelly, that is the extent of the WGU part of this presentation.
Thank you so much, Brent. Okay, we are going to move on to our next group, Education Design Lab and Southern New Hampshire University. I'll let you guys take it away.
Fantastic. Josh, maybe I'll do my introduction first. Hello, Naomi Boyer here, joining you from sunny Florida in the United States. I'm the Executive Director of Digital Transformation at Education Design Lab. And the 21st Century Skills Framework that we used for our rich skill descriptor library and digital micro-credentials are the work within my team. I'm really excited to share with you today how the development of our framework into a skills library has springboarded and scaled the work we believe is a moral imperative to helping learner earners become visible in the marketplace. Josh?
Hi, I'm Joshua Heyman, Director of Product Data Standards at Southern New Hampshire University. I work very closely with our curriculum design team in taking the curriculum that we build for our academic offerings, as well as potential other micro-credentials or other products we might want to deliver, and worked very closely with Naomi on trying to align these two great things together that we think it can get us some really powerful utility in the future.
So you've heard lots of acronyms and lots of terms, and we've seen lots of systems, and we're going to try to now kind of put a use case together for you to show you how all of this can work. If you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So for those of you who joined the showcase last month, be patient with me as I bring our newcomers a little bit up to speed. If you missed it, you can find the recording on the Open Skills Network website under events and recordings. But just for some context, the lab, this is the group I work with, Education Design Lab, is a national nonprofit, and we design distinct higher ed and workforce models and credentialing in response to the changing future of work and the needs and goals of people from historically underinvested communities. Based on thousands of interviews with learners, we envision a new learner-centered, learn-to-work paradigm where learning is affordable, portable, flexible, relevant, and visible for all. Portability and visibility are areas that the development of the rich skill descriptor library that I'm going to talk about and the building of context and connections through Credential Engine is helping us to achieve. Next slide, please. So what is in our rich skill descriptor collection? I'm going to walk you through the labs, walk you through it, but listen to the last month's session if you want to learn more in detail about this 21st century skills and our micro-credentials, digital micro-credentials. There are 9 digital micro-credentials, and we just added number 9, which is self-directed learning, in the lab library. This is not an exhaustive set of transferable skills. The lab merely focused on the most requested and emphasized micro-credentials, knowing that others would emerge over time. One question you might be asking yourself as you look at these is like, how do you measure empathy or any of the other hard to quantify skills? Next slide, please. You measure them by getting into demonstrable skills, and there's 4 sub-competencies under each one of our digital micro-credentials. And you can see from this particular slide that the digital micro-credentials critical thinking, which is at the center, and the 4 associated sub-competencies of this particular credential are gather and assess relevant information, identify patterns, draw conclusions, and question assumptions. While there's 4 sub-competencies in each digital micro-credential, our framework only has 23 sub-competencies, and that's because of the overlap, which I'm going to show you in the next slide, that occurs in our framework. This is where the complexities come in, and this is where having rich skill descriptors and being able to align them and map them to other credentials becomes really important. Next slide, please. This is our Metro map. Many of you have seen this before, and again, just bear with me a second here. What you can see in the oral communication line is if we come in, you can see there are 3 individual sub-competencies. So if I'm on the far right there with oral communication, speak with clarity and precision, storytelling, and appropriate tone and word choice are individual sub-competencies on that oral communication line. Then we get to the 4th one, which is listen actively. And listen actively actually intersects with empathy and collaboration. So there's intersections in each of these skills that isn't necessarily accomplished when we're working only from that rich skill descriptor. This is where using some of the mapping and the contextualizing opportunities allows us to show how all of these separate and segmented skill statements work together. Next slide, please. So this is the rich skill descriptor collection that lives in Open Skills Management tool. What's really important here is how the data is organized, the information, the metadata versus the specifics. The 2 QR codes there will take you to our frameworks. We have 2 collections within Open Skills Management tool. And the difference in those 2 collections is because one represents the framework I just showed you in that DC Metro map, and the other dissects the relationships within one sub-competency statement. So the top visual there shows you that listen actively has 3 sub-statements that are separated by semicolon. Form productive working relationships, semicolon, ensure that others feel heard and valued, semicolon, and grasp and retain information. The box on the bottom shows you that in our individual statements collection, we've segmented that listen actively combined sub-competencies into individual skills statements. So there are 2 different collections you have to keep in mind as we continue on this skills journey together. Next slide, please. So you can't read the words, just bear with me a second here. This is a screenshot from Credential Engine itself. And what I'm showing you here is we link through in our alignments to Credential Engine's framework, our competency framework and Credential Engine. And we have aligned and mapped to the Department of Labor's building blocks framework. So the bottom portion there, those links that you can barely see on the bottom there, are the alignments to that. We're able to show relationships within skill statements as well as between others. So that now when we talk about how are we linking these rich skill descriptors, how are we linking these libraries, skills libraries we've created, and how can we really make them open and capitalize on them? As we move into this dialogue, as Josh is going to show you how they've utilized this rich skill descriptor library to then map through and give value within Southern New Hampshire University. Next slide, please. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, thanks, Naomi. So we're really like the way that Education Design Lab thinks about the work. It's why we were excited to partner with them. What we're speaking to today is our kind of first foray, public official foray into RSDs. We've been part of OSN for several years. We participated in the OSMT pilot last year and got a lot of really great experience doing that work. And today we're really focused on this theme of alignment. So what Naomi was speaking to was how their framework is aligned to another industry set of competencies. We want to do the same thing, and we're really interested in exploring this concept of mutually verified alignments. So quite often when we're creating curriculum, we will align to any number of recognized industry frameworks or standards, and it's often kind of closed off within our own documentation. It's very difficult to make that information visible and transparent, particularly externally, particularly to the learner and employers. And the credential registry gives us the ability to do that. It also gives us the ability to represent that alignment in both directions. So if we go to the next slide quickly, you'll see again, it won't be perfect. Maybe we could have made it a little more readable, but this is our RSD as this is one example of an RSD from SNHU represented in the registry. And you see, again, it looks very similar to Naomi's. It can hold many of the same data points that an RSD in OSMT would hold, such as an alignment to an MZ Burning Glass open skill, keywords. It can hold alignments to SOC codes, etc. All the same metadata that would be in an RSD in OSMT. We were heavily influenced by that work, both by the OSMT team and OSN, the technical advisory group. And then one of the things that we're working towards is the ability to not only represent what you see here, which is a major alignment from the SNHU side pointing at EDL's framework, but a major alignment from EDL's side pointing at our framework. This mutually verified is not, it moves us a little bit away from that kind of take our word for it mentality and more towards this, what we feel is potentially more credible. Now, those opportunities will not always present themselves, but it has the potential to be infinitely more powerful by verifying these opportunities. The other thing that this affords us is, in the future, the ability to more easily align to some of the credentials that EDL is offering. That's ongoing work that we are hopefully very close to completing. The ability to not only align SNE2 curriculum to the actual 21st century skills micro-credentials, but also represent that publicly, openly, as machine readable data in the registry. I think that was all we had today. Back to Kelly.
Thanks so much. And actually, I am just going to do a quick pass off to Danielle at Learning Economy Foundation.
Thanks, Kelly. Everyone, if you are asking, how do I get started, you're in luck today, because we're going to talk a little bit about how to make RSDs. So Danielle here, I work with the Learning Economy Foundation and T3 Innovation Network from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. And the LEF team is supporting OSN's pilots and collabs of OSMIT and RSDs that Joshua just mentioned. He was in one of those pilots last time. And this time we have 7 going who are using OSMIT right now to create and reuse RSDs and align them to frameworks, standards, courses, jobs. Learning Economy Foundation, we're on a mission towards next generation ed and employment ecosystems, addressing inequity with learner-centered protocols, and supporting the Internet of Education with open source tools and open standards, like what we're talking about today. So I'm going to go into a high level on how to make RSDs. So the OSMIT Open Skills Management tool, which we've been referencing, is now free, open source, ready to go. It's released. It's under Apache 2.0. And you can use it, and it's going to help you make these rich skills descriptors we've been talking about, which are machine readable, searchable, got all this context baked in, which we're looking at here. And so these are the main properties inside an RSD. And we've got, I'll go through them kind of real quick, the ID, which is a canonical URL. It's the permanent home for your skill. It's what everything is going to link back to. The name, author, skill statement, you see those have asterisks on them. Those are the only ones that are required now for you to put in. And so it's really a very minimal, lightweight requirement here. But of course, the more metadata you put in, the richer it gets. And so we've also got categories. Those you've got right now, you've got one category that you can put your skills into to help sort through them. Keywords, any number of those you want to add to help searching, any standards you'd like to link to, certifications, occupations. We use ONET and SOC, and it's pretty nifty. You put in the lowest level, so the most specific occupational code, and it's going to fill in all the ones above it, all the parent codes that are broader in nature, so that you get a better idea of, all the occupation names and categories that some skill is related to. And then you can also attach to the name of an employer who is hiring for this skill. And then you can have a whole bunch of alignments, which is what you were seeing earlier. You put a name and a link in, and then can create a web of lovely data about what the skill is connected to. And then there's the status, and the status is filled in for you by OSMIT, but we have 3 options. You have your skill published, draft form, or you can archive it as well. And so, yeah, this is a way of thinking about how RSDs fit into the whole system. So right now, the dark purple box could be an instance that you as an organization host, and you have a library. And so that's a one-to-one. You have one instance, one library. It's your big thing of collections. And you can have any number of collections in there, and those can have any number of RSDs within them. And so Also, we mentioned in the beginning, search is coming up. You'll be able to search across these instances and reuse RSDs. So that's very exciting way to use these. But right now, yeah, we're focusing on, hey, let's start getting them created. And so Osmint has 4 main functions. Right now, you can author, you can create skills in-app, or you can import them. You can edit and make changes. You can organize by grouping them into those collections, and you can publish to let the world use and improve your work under an open license. And another note about all these properties, you are seeing this first, iteration, but this is not written in absolute stone. We want your feedback. This is a community-driven project. We want to know what's going to help solve the problems that you have out in the world. So think about it with that hat on as we go through this process of how to create an RSD. So we're looking at particular skill from WGU right now in one of those collections that was shared at the beginning. This one's called Appreciate Diversity. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that this is one inside of the collection, Character Education. And then you go to the next slide. And this is right now inside of the library. And this is, of course, white labelable. So your org could go right up there in the top, and then you'd see all the RSDs that you've created across your collections or that you've added into your library. And so they'll all live there, and you can kind of have 2 views right now. You look at all your RSDs or you look at all your collections. And then next. So let's real quick go through what it would look like to create an RSD. Next slide. You'll get this page, and it's not important to kind of get into the weeds here, but it's to give you an idea that this is what it looks like. These are those properties that we discussed. You're able to type in and add new new categories, new keywords from here. And this is the manual way of going into Osmint and creating a skill. Next slide. You can also batch import. So if you hit that button from, again, back at the main screen here, you'll have an opportunity that we'll see on the next slide to download a CSV template that I'm showing on the bottom here that just has those fields in it that you can fill out, and then you will go ahead and just drag and drop upload, and you'll be able to match. You do a little quick matching if you've got any, if you've named them differently to help import, and then you'll be able to work on your skills in the system from here. And when you've got everything in, what can you do with it? It's a great so what question, right? And you can download and now, for example, upload them into the credential registry. And you can use the template actually to upload directly to there. So this is kind of a great way to get your data into a machine readable format, and then you can start using it in lots of places. And you can connect, there into credentials and courses and pathways. And in the future, this can be actually an automated integration, like we have an automated integration with Badger to the registry. So that's what a high-level overview of creating RSDs looks like. Unless anyone has any questions right away while we're here, I'm going to hand it back to Kelly.
Thank you so much, Danielle, and thank you all for sharing along in your journey. This has definitely caused some interesting stuff coming up in the chat, and I want to make sure we jump into Q&A so that we have a chance to get through these. So you guys still have time to enter more questions into the chat while I start on the questions that are already there. I know some of the questions, by the way, were answered through the chat as we were going along, but what I'd like to do is just recall those questions so that anyone that may have that question in mind but just didn't get to see that answered in the chat will have the opportunity to do so. So I'm going to start off with a question from Nate. Does the credentialing badging connect back to evidence that the learner has demonstrated, or are they two disconnected systems? He's thinking about how portfolios of evidence connect to the OSN or not. Who on our esteemed group of panelists would like to grab that one?
I could take a first stab at that.
Thank you.
Sure. Using Badger or any Open Badges compliant tool, there are ways to award or issue badges to individuals that include more information around the narrative explanation of what they did, and then evidence in terms of links to the work product or a portfolio-based work product or something along those lines. It's an option for issuing organizations to go to that level of baking actual evidence of what the recipient of the award did to earn it. In addition to the, I guess you'd say, the narrative explanation of earning criteria in the master badge properties that explain in general what needs to be done. But the student specific work product is something that can be covered if an organization wishes to go that far.
Did anyone else from the panel want to add to that? Okay, well, if you decide you do, let me know. The next question that came in was from Josephine. What about if you do use alignment to professional standards in Badger already? Can you add skills as well?
And the answer, I'll take a stab at that as well. The answer to that is absolutely. Again, alignments, I think initially the intent was to focus them more squarely on academic standards, but folks saw the broader value of alignments that could fall into different categories. WGU uses alignments for RSDs and when appropriate, SOC codes, CIP codes. So it is a big bucket of things that can be defined by the framework name. So again, long-winded way of saying we have different types of alignments on WGU badges. RSDs are a very important type of alignment to us, very close to our heart. But the idea that you can mix and match your alignments and not have to stick with one type of alignment for a badge and limit yourself to that, it's not necessary. There are ways to distinguish them.
Thank you again. We have, well, this was more of a, I'm not sure if we got to this, but if anyone has any comments on this, Frank asked if we would be chatting about differing levels of proficiency within skills. And so I don't know if anyone has anything to add there on that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to start a little bit about the conversation and how just Western Governors University has been approaching that within kind of how we have defined skills and used rich skills descriptors. So for WGU, since we are competency based, what we have done is seen that level of proficiency happening at the competency statement level, alternative to the rich skill descriptor level. We have not, it's something that we tested out originally when we started thinking about skills, having different levels of RSDs. And what we were seeing was that it was, really resulting in a large number of skills that were essentially saying the same thing, just in like a different context, potentially like the level of supervision or something. And so after testing that out, what we came to the conclusion was that for our use, we weren't going to create that level of proficiency, but if it makes sense for your use, the beauty in the RSD schema is that you can decide to add the level of proficiency for your RSDs for your intended use case, because that can all happen within your skill statement.
Yeah, I can just say from the SNHU side, had a similar experience. I think it did result in kind of a proliferation. I think our approach was more around just articulating what that performance was and its relationship with the competency, and the assessment and the curriculum kind of spoke to what proficiency level somebody was acquiring. But the technology certainly supports the ability to represent that if that's something that you want to align to. Our competencies do align to Lumina Foundation's Connecting Credentials framework. So there is, at least internal to SNHU, some frame of reference for proficiency, but I think there's flexibility for people to represent it the way that they need to.
Thank you guys, and thanks for those additional comments, Frank. We had a really great back and forth that started with a few questions from Kelvin and Nate that I just wanted to again share with the rest of the group. Are there, this one coming from Kelvin first, are there a subgroup of schools in OSN working together to use the same skill statements that align with their similar CBE courses? He's just wondering if we can get to a point where schools with CBE courses use the same competency skill statements. Who would like to grab that one? I know we had a lot of answers in the chat.
So I think,
we were all, I'm sorry. I think we were all doing like +1 and agree that we'd love to get there, but it's very aspirational at this point. I think as more skill libraries and competency frameworks become available for others to link into, it helps elevate to more common language, but we always have the, I'm a special snowflake, group that says they want their own. And so that leveling of, it's very aspirational. I think we all want to be there, but reasonably, that's where some of the translation tools, I know T3 is working on the Open Competency Framework Collaborative to think about how we can kind of translate from these different systems and different words into one meaningful whole.
yeah, and to add on to what Naomi was saying, I think that would be a really interesting future potential OSN collaborative project to put forward. And you don't necessarily have to know what other partner institution you may want to work with, right? If you're interested in doing some of that work with OSN, I think that's where we encourage you to reach out to us and let us know. And we can kind of help matchmake you through LEF with other institutions who are also interested in partnering and working together on that work.
Thank you guys. And I also think we're all just saying like, hey, tell your friends and tell them to come along so that we have more to pull from. Nate actually had a really great comment about one of the questions that Frank asked, and he was thinking of all of this from a K-12 perspective. He said, often we see progressions around competencies that speak to distinct levels of proficiency around a singular competency. He was wondering how they would intersect here. And I just think that was an interesting call out. He mentioned he could see the badge awarded at the end of the progression, but it would be interesting to have nano badges along the way there. I know we had, again, some conversation going on, but for those of us that weren't following in the chat, could a couple of the panelists just jump in and talk a little bit about connections back through K-12?
I can just say we're still at the kind of beginning stages of this at SNHU, but the idea of smaller badges kind of leading up to larger badges, some of which might be aligned to smaller units like an RSD, leading up to larger badges that are aligned to credentials, is something we're very interested in and moving forward in. I think that's something I've heard other people exploring. But similarly, I think people are still trying to find the best practices in that space.
I think anytime you gamify learning in the K-12 space, it becomes a natural motivator for students. And if we can find a way to, again, pilot with a group of individuals or schools, a way to gamify and use the same RSDs, the same outcomes, same common assessments, I think that would be pretty powerful.
I can give an example of one actually underway right now with Southern New Hampshire University. We have a project, Education Design Lab has a Catalyze grant that we are working on, a project called Propel Polk. Polk County happens to be the county I live in. And there's a robust talent pipeline development ecosystem here that has kind of taken shape. Through that project, we're delivering our 21st century skills digital micro-credentials into Avid classes. Those are specific courses to build professional skills for folks to be able, for high school students to move into careers. And we're working with 450 11th and 12th graders to award these digital micro-credentials. They will have completed the skills associated within our rich skill descriptor collection. And Southern New Hampshire University is investigating our content, curriculum, and assessments aligned to those rich skill descriptors to be able to determine if it's possible that they could award credit academic credit, courses as a result of the completion of these digital micro-credentials for these high school students. Okay, we're connecting the pipeline here. It's learning, it's about skills, it's about mastery and demonstration, and how can we give folks the value for that? And so we're delighted to be able to partner with Southern New Hampshire University on that portion of the project, and to see how we can add greater value for these credentials, these shorter term credentials, micro-credentials that are being awarded for the learner to potentially go on to post-secondary education opportunities, but also out into the workforce.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Naomi. I think I'm just going to amplify Callie's comment. That is so rad. It is. So unfortunately, we do not have time to continue on the questions. We did have 3 more, and I have them here. So we will do our best to gather everything. And I know there's a ton of links that were shared in the chat. So we will try to gather everything up and make sure that comes to you guys in a follow-up for, with answers to those 3 questions that we didn't get to. I apologize. I wanted to throw up the QR code again on the screen. If you guys could take a quick, if it takes you 2 minutes, I would be surprised. Just screenshot, use your photo thing, get on that, just answer those 5 questions. We'll put the link back in the chat as well, and we'll probably be bothering you to answer the survey via email as well. But we do really want your feedback, because it's so important in going forward in this journey to make sure that we get to all of the topics, to understand where you're at, and make sure that we're able to provide you with amazing value here at our showcases. So we really appreciate it. I also want to again thank OSN, Open Skills Network, for their amazing work. All of our presenters here today, you guys have been amazing, and all of our members for joining us on this journey. We're just really excited to continue with you all. Another special shout out to Walmart Foundation for their continued support of OSN. And if you guys are interested in keeping up to date with our events, or you'd like to join OSN as a member, please head over to the website, openskillsnetwork.org, click on Join Now. You can also email us if that's easier for you. And I'm going to give you guys 1 second here to go ahead and fill this out. If anyone's having trouble with the QR code, don't forget, right in the chat is the link to go ahead and answer those 5 questions for us. We so appreciate it. But again, thank you all for taking the time out today to join us. We are so appreciative. We look forward to seeing you next month and hope you all have an absolutely wonderful day.